All right, so blend shapes. Here's our guy. Like I said, his name is Phil. An important thing to do here, I don't know why he's so subdivided. That's not good. There it is. All right, that's much better. So an important thing to do before you start really getting into this is make sure you're naming your objects as you go. It's really, really simple to skip this step, and you want to make sure that you're naming as you go, because if you've got a ton of these things, and sorry? Oh, okay. If you've got a ton of these things and you're trying to figure out exactly which one you're trying to grab a hold of, having them called P cube 1, P cube 2, P cube 47, P cube 85 is not going to help you at all. So we'll start out by renaming this one. We'll call it the base, and this will be this is our main object. This is our if there were a body attached to this, this would be the base character. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to duplicate this, and we can do this either going up to Edit and Duplicate, or you can do Command D. And then I'm going to take this, I'm just going to move it off to the side. There's our first one, and it's base 1. So we're going to call this, I'm going to do just a really simple demonstration on how this works, and then we'll talk a little bit about how you want to break it down further than I'm going to. But I want to get the concept across. So we're going to call this one left. It's going to be his left eyebrow going up. So we're going to go brow up left. You want to have a naming convention that you adopt and follow. A lot of places will put the side of the body first. They'll say left, it might be left eyebrow up or left what have you. I like to put them in the order that I'm looking for the information. So when I'm animating the character, I don't care whether it's the left or the right side of the character until I find the feature that I want to animate. So the first thing I'm going to look for is, if I want to do his eyebrows, the first thing I'm going to look for is his eyebrow controls. So that's why I put that information in first. Then I'm going to want to find the control that either moves it up or down, and those will be grouped together if you're using the same naming convention. And then I'm going to care about whether it's right or left. I don't really care about which side of the body it's on until I find the control that I actually want to use. I can do this because it's just me using this. If you're working in a studio situation, there will be a naming convention that you'll be expected to follow. So whatever the convention is in the studio that you're working at, that's the naming convention you want to use. On your own projects, you can do it however you like, as long as you adopt some kind of naming convention. So we're going to do probably about 3 different blend shapes here. I could take this guy right here and duplicate him and move him out, but I prefer to go back to the base model whenever I can. Mostly because it eliminates a troubleshooting step. If I run into difficulties later on, I know that I've copied all of my blend shape models from my base model. So that's not anything that I have to concern myself with if I run into things that aren't behaving the way that they should. I can take that whole troubleshooting step completely out. So you can or not, it's up to you, but I prefer to do it that way. So we'll do this. This one will be his eye closing, so we'll call it eye close right. We'll do that on the right side. You're always, when you're naming right and left, you're always doing it based on the character's body. So this is his right eye. This is not the right eye of, on the right of the screen. It's his right eye. And the simple reason for that is, first of all, that's how we'd expect it to be. But secondly, the minute this character turns around, if we're doing it based on screen orientation, now they don't make any sense. So if we're naming sides of the body, it's always the character's side of the body. We'll make one more here. Move this over, and this will be mouth up left. So here's our base object. Here's our brow up. Here's our eye close. And there's our mouth up. So now what we want to do, we're going to leave our base alone. And we want to take this guy, we're going to make our alterations to our, these are our blend shape models. We're going to alter our blend shape models so that they create these changes that we're after. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to double click here, and we're going to do camera-based selection. So when we select things, we want the camera-based selection turned on, and that's so we don't accidentally select through the character and grab vertices on the back. Excuse me. Remember that the way a blend shape works is it takes a look, it compares the vertexes on the base model and on the blend shape and makes any changes in terms of their position. So if you've accidentally selected stuff on the back when you're making your blend shape, you don't realize that those vertexes are going to move when you apply the blend shape. Yeah?
Is camera-based selection the one that, if it's on, do you select through, or if it's off, do you select through?
If it's off, you select through.
Okay.
Yeah, if camera-based, when you turn on camera-based selection, it'll only select vertexes that the camera can see when you do the selection. So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to select vertex, and I'm going to drag select here and get his eyebrow, because this is his brow up left. And then I'm going to turn around here just to show you, because camera-based selection is on, I didn't get any in the back. Come in a little tight, and then I'm just going to take these and move them up. Now this is just a demo. This is exceedingly simple. If I were actually doing this for my character, I'd probably have a series of these. I would have, I'd naturally have up and down for both the left and the right side, but I want to make these as flexible as I possibly can. So rather than just do a whole brow moving up and a whole brow moving down on either side, what I would probably do is grab just the inside brow vertexes and do a blend shape of that up and down. And then I grab the middle brow vertexes, do a blend shape up, blend shape down. Then grab the outside vertexes to blend shape up, blend shape down. Because that gives me the most flexibility in terms of sculpting that eyebrow into an expression that I want the character to have. If I could do, you know, eyebrow happy, eyebrow angry, eyebrow sad, and really kind of meld those. Like if I want to do sad eyebrow, I could take this and I could move it down like that, and I could take these guys and move them down like that, and he's got kind of, you know, sad eyebrow. But that's the only shape I can ever get out of this blend shape. It doesn't have nearly the flexibility that having this eyebrow broken up into 3 segments and moving them independently up and down will give me. So when you're making your blend shapes, you want them to be as flexible as they possibly can. Does it mean you end up with a lot of them? Yes, it does. But it's worth the effort because it gives you an awful lot of flexibility. So there's our first one. That's our left eyebrow up object. There we are. And then I'm going to come over here. Is it good? We okay? All right. So now I'm on eye close right, and I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go to vertexes again. I'm going to get My vertex is here, and I'm just going to close the eye like he's winking. Move that up a little bit. Move that up. And there's my second blend shape. And again, with this, you know, I'd probably have a lid, a top lid come down and a bottom lid come up as two separate blend shapes on this. And then we'll go with the mouth here. We'll get this, and we'll bring this up a little bit. See, here's where, right now, my camera-based selection is kind of failing me a little bit because I can't get those interior points. I have to kind of roll around a little bit to get them. But it's worth the effort because I'm definitely not going to accidentally get the back. So we'll get those. We're still good. Move that up a little bit. Move that up. And then maybe we'll get these bottom ones too. And move those up as well. Yeah.
For the eye, do you want the whole eye or just the blade part, just at the front, or do you want the whole all the vertex?
In my case, I grabbed all the way back to the back of the eye socket, but you know, just this is just for practice. You can do whatever you like. It's fine. And there's our mouth. So we've got all of our guys here. Okay. So we've got them all done. We've got them all named. So we're in good shape. So now we want to make a blend shape interface. We're going to go to the animation menu set because we're going to use create deformer blend shape eventually. This is one of those situations where you have to pick your objects individually. Drag selecting over these is the worst thing you could possibly do, to select all of them. Because when you do that, you're allowing Maya to select the order. And if you do that in this case, you could end up with your blends applied to something other than what you're after. So it's also a good idea to pick them in the order that you want them to appear in the interface window we're about to create. So if we want them to appear in this order, I'd select this guy first, and then shift select the eye, and then shift select the mouth, and then finally, the very last one I pick is my base object. We want the base object you always want to select last because all of these blends are now going to get applied to that piece of geometry. And then we're going to come up here to create deformers and select blend shape. It's always, when you see an option box, it's always a good idea to click on it just to make sure everything's cool. I'm going to go in here and reset this just in case anybody's been messing around with it. Looks like everything's fine.
I'm sorry, how do you get to the blend shape options again?
I forgot.
It's animate deform.
So it's in the animation menu set.
It's
Why am I not-
called something else in my
There we go.
2016.
Yeah, you want to be in the animation
Oh,
menu
yeah,
set.
It's named differently in 2016.
In 2016, it's a little different. Yeah, this is 2015. So, and then we're going to go create deformers and blend shape. And we don't have the whole title up here because my screen's smaller. But we're going to create blend shape. And there we are. On top of our object here, we see we have this blend shape node that's now there. And we've got our blends applied to this object. So now if we come in here to our window menu, we can go to animation editors and blend shape. And here's our blend shape interface. And we've got brow up left, eye close left, and mouth up left, all applied to our base object. If we take this slider and slide it up, watch the eyebrow. Ready? Here we go. Look at that. How about that? And then our eye closing, that works just fine. And there goes our mouth up. And we can combine these in different combinations to get the effects that we want. Now these key buttons down here are the way that you create your animation with this character. So let's say we wanted him to wiggle his eyebrows. We'd start out here on frame 1, and we're going to key all of these just because you want a baseline. And then we'll come out about 4 frames, and we'll take his brow up, and we'll key that again. And then we'll come out a few more frames, and we'll take the brow down, and we'll key it again. And we'll come out a few more frames, and we'll take the brow up again, and we'll key it. And I'm going to key these 2 as well at this point. And then we'll come out a few more frames, and we'll have him give you a wink and a little smile. And we'll key all of those. And then we can close this. We can come over here and hit play. And there we go. Look at that. So what Maya is doing right now is it's taking a look at all the vertexes on the surface of that object. And it's comparing the vertex positions in space to what the blend shapes are doing. If the blend shape is active, then those vertexes are in a different position, and it'll move it to that new position. The reason the eye and the mouth aren't moving, they're moving a little bit because of tangent lines. We'll talk about those in a little while. But the reason the eye and the mouth aren't moving until the very end is because we had a key at 1 and we had a key at whatever it was, frame 10, that held them in place. And then for the last few frames, they're making that transition because we applied the blends. These are, I forgot to mention, these are also in other software, they're called morph targets. That's sort of the generic term for them. Maya names everything special so that it's a little confusing. They chose blend shapes. Okay.
Where's blend shapes?
Sorry?
Where's blend?
It's in the animation menu set, and it's under Create Deformers. Okay, so let's get our window open again. Animation editor, blend shape. So let's say you find that you're using this combination a lot. You get this thing where your character's like a lounge lizard dude, and he does this thing where he kind of raises an eyebrow and blinks and gives you kind of a half smile. Rather than manipulate all of these all the time, you can apply the blend shapes and duplicate the base and then move it out here. You can see the blends are already, these are already applied. So we'll bring these back down. Right? So this blend is a combination of these 3. If you wanted to add this in, because you use it a lot, you don't want to have to deal with 3 sliders, you can select your new shape that you created from manipulating these sliders, shift select the base, go to Edit Deformers, and blend shape, add, and it adds this in. Now see, here's what I was talking about before. I didn't rename this before I went in here. So it came in as base 1. Now we could change the name of this. Let's call it Hey There. So now if we get in here on this guy, I'm going to turn off the mouse posé for a second. We've got our brow up, we've got our eye closed, we've got our mouth up, but we can also go, hey there. and just take that one slider and combine all three of those into one. So if you find that you're using some shapes a lot, that's a good way to kind of speed things up. The whole reason we do things like this is to be able to animate as quickly as we possibly can. Time is money. The sooner you can get your shot done, the less expensive it is. So the longer, if I'm spending a week doing a shot, then it costs whatever my salary is for a week. If I take 2 days to complete the shot, then it's 2/5 of what my weekly pay is. So that's less expensive. So it keeps the cost down. So we want to provide tools that make it really, really easy to speed things up if we can. Now, issues that students run into sometimes. Sometimes a student will make a blend shape and then want to test it and put it in, they'll grab it, they'll grab the base, they'll do, create deformers blend shape, and then play with the slider and go, look, it works. Excuse me, and that's great, except remember what I said about how the blends, how the deformers are moved through sequentially. So as you're doing this over and over and over again, you're getting multiple blend shape windows, and at some point you're going to adjust one slider that's going to undo something that you're doing with another slider. So resist the temptation to test every single blend as you make it. Instead, make all your blend shapes, select them all, select the base, create one blend shape window, and then you can play with them to your heart's content. And if you run into any difficulties, then we can troubleshoot those as they come up.
How did you do that last one again?
The last one?
Yeah.
How did I add it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that again. Here's the other thing about this too, by the way. So this one takes and moves these things up. It moves them to the maximum extent of this blend, right? So here's the eyebrow on this one. Now, if I grab the brow slider and I move it, it's still going to move it up. So you have to be careful if you've used the existing sliders to make a new slider, because it's not about where it is relative to its original position. It's how much of a change is there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure, like if I took the eye closed right and I pump it all the way up, it gets ugly. Like his bottom lid goes shooting up over, his mouth does this really obnoxious thing. So you want to be careful if you've used any of the existing sliders to make a new slider, because they do build on each other. Okay, but let's make another one. Let's do, this time we'll just do his eyebrow and his eye. So we'll slide both of these up. So this is the expression we want. Okay. With those active, we're just going to select the head geometry of the base and duplicate it. So Command D or Control D if you're on a Windows machine. And then we'll take it, we'll slide it out there. Because these sliders were active when we duplicated it, those are the positions of the vertexes when we duplicate it.
So it duplicates it exactly where it was.
You duplicate it the way that you have it set up, that you want that blend to be. And then we're going to, just like we did the first time, we're going to select our blend shape and then select the base, shift select the base. But this time we're going to go to Edit Deformers, Blend Shape, and Add. And that'll add in a new slider with our new base. And this is lid, brow, we'll say. And then if we come over here, we'll zoom in on this guy. Oh, these are still up. See, I'll move those down. And there's lid and brow moving together. Does that help?
Yeah.
Great. So again, you don't want to create multiple blend shapes because they will override multiple blend shape interfaces because they will override each other. create all of the blends that you think you're going to need, and then apply them all at once. Okay, you're going to end up with a giant scene with all kinds of geometry in it. If you look at his monitor right now, he's got a nice chorus line started up there. They got their arms around each other. It's very we are the world kind of thing, which is fine. Now here's the cool thing. Check this out. I've got 5. Now I got my scene here with 5 blends in it. I'm going to close this. I'm going to take all of these, select all these guys, and delete them. I know. It's panic time. Window, animation editor, blend shape editor, and look at this. They still work. Because what Maya's done is it's stored the displacement information about these vertexes on this model. So when your scene fills up with 30, 40 of your character, once you've got the blends applied and they're working, save that file. Don't ever just delete it and then go, and I'm fine. Because you might find that later on you need to go back and adjust the modeling of that blend shape. Happens all the time in production. Riggers prepare the models for the animators to use, and they do their absolute level best to try and anticipate just how much an eyebrow needs to go up, or a lip needs to come inward, or what have you. And 9 times out of 10, they hand it off to the animator, and the animator goes, "I need it to go a little higher." They're like, "Are you kidding? It's practically coming off the top of his head." "Yeah, I know, but it needs to go up a little bit more." So if you keep the geometry in the scene, you can go back and adjust that geometry, move those vertexes up some more to get the more extreme pose. So what the scene with all of your blend shape copies in it, keep a version of that. But for your production, for the when you're going to rig the skeleton, save a version of that, save a copy of the one with all of the blend shape geometry in it, then delete all of the blend shapes, leave in just the main model, and then that would be the one that you put the rig in. That's the one you put the skeleton in. Because the blends are already applied to the geometry, they'll always go with it unless you delete the blend shape interface. So, but you want to keep all of the vertex work that you've done in getting your facial expressions working. We don't need all that extra geometry in the scene, though. Yeah.
Could you do that with like eye positions, so you have a left, right?
That's a great question. Generally, eyes are done as separate objects. So eyes are always separate objects on a 3D model. You notice our friend here doesn't have any eyeballs.
How do they stay attached though? We don't always retinas.
Right. Sometimes they don't, but there's a number of different ways you can attach them. For our purposes, we'll talk about this next week. But for our purposes, what we'll do is we'll parent the eyeballs to the joint that controls the head. So then when the head rotates, the eyeballs will go with it. So
That's the hope anyways.
it doesn't always work, but most of the time it does. The very first time I taught this class, one of the students said, "Yeah, I've got my eyeballs all hooked up, but when I rotate the character's head, they move twice as far as the rotation of the character's head." Exactly. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So we were looking at it, we're poking at it. And I couldn't, I didn't open the right window to figure out what was wrong. So I said, "Well, I'm gonna have to give me the file, and I'll look at it some more." And we're walking out the door, and she says, "Yeah, I just, I grouped them together, and then I parented it to the head joint. So I don't understand." I'm like, "Wait a minute, you grouped them together?" Because you can't do that unless you do it carefully. Because what happens is the group gets rotational information from the joint, and then the eyes also get it because they're a child of the group, so it gets applied to them as well. So what happens with the eyeballs is what's called a double translation, where they're essentially getting twice. They're being told to move or rotate a certain amount 2 times, and they come shooting right out of the forehead. So you have to be careful. So anyway, we'll talk about keeping the eyeballs in the head next week.
I was wondering, like, for fun shapes, let's say for a movie, you look at like the character from Brave,
Merida?
Merida.
Uh-huh.
Approximately how many fun shapes do you think they had
Hundreds.
just for her face?
Hundreds. I read somewhere that Gollum, Lord of the Rings, you know, and the other one, what's the Hobbit, the terrible movies. I thought,
I agree with that.
personal statement,
I agree
I
with
thought
that.
they were terrible. He had over 3,000 blend shapes on his face. Now you can't, as an animator, you can't control that many sliders. There's just no way. So things get hooked up to other things, and you know, the other thing is, remember, these work linearly. They move in a straight line. So when we did his eyebrow, it was taking the vertexes from here and moving them straight up, right? So even on our face, those things, that doesn't really work that way. So where you really see it is on an eyeball with the eyelid. If you've got an integrated eyelid on your character, you can't use a single blend shape to close the eyelid, because what happens is you can sculpt it so it surrounds the eyelid, but when it's in its unblended position, it's back over here, and if the vertexes are here when it's closed, if you apply one blend shape, it's just going to go straight down to it, which slices the eyeball. It cuts right through the eyeball until it gets to the final position. So what you have to do is you have to do interim shapes. You do 3 or 4 blend shapes that approximate a curve.
Well, another thing is I was wondering, like, if since it does go vertically with our eyebrows even when they move, they don't really go straight up. They kind of form to the skull
Right.
underneath it. How do they have it so that they stay there and form against the skull?
Well, that's where the multiple blend shapes come in, because you do sort of stages of getting there. Because the skull underneath really isn't going to change very much. I mean, it'll change with you know, right. It'll change with you know, smiles and frowns and that kind of thing. And that's what happens with all that sculpting is you anticipate all of the potential. You try and anticipate all of the potential expressions that you'll have to do, and then you do a blend shape for as many, you know, all of those, and then you hook them up in a way so that one will move a certain amount, and then the next one will take over and move the next amount, and then another one takes over and moves the next amount. And it's all invisible to the animator because they just have a control that they're sliding or they're dragging around or however it's set up. But yeah, it's hundreds or thousands. Even on a simple character like this, we could easily get into the dozens. You know, if he's got brow left up and down, brow right up and down, brow left inner up and down, brow left mid up and down, brow out, left brow up and down. There's 6 controls for that one eyebrow. So for the eyebrows, we've got a minimum of 12 controls, minimum, and you could definitely go higher than that. So even on somebody that's this simple, you could end up with a dozen. Well, we've already established a dozen controls, and we've only dealt with the eyebrows. So that's why the temptation is always, I'll just make happy eyebrows and sad eyebrows and all that stuff. But it really limits your ability to mix and match. When, you know, 12 sounds like a lot for the eyebrows until you start wanting to sculpt expressions. Then you know, you don't have to have as many to get where you want to go.
Now I see why riggers get angry when they aren't appreciated.
There's not an animator on the face of the earth that does not appreciate the rigging team.
Well, I would say society, when they look at a movie, it's like, this animated so well, the animators
Yeah.
are so good.
It's one of those things where that's the term people understand. So that's you know, basically everybody from the outside, everybody in the animation studio is an animator. Dominic will tell you, when he was working there, somebody said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I work at Pixar. The next question was always, oh, are you an animator? And he's not. He's a TD, technical director. He's a compositing artist. And you say, no, I'm a technical director, compositing artist. Well, what is that? And then you start describing it, and people's eyes just glaze over. And it's like, well, my responsibility is making sure that when the shots come through and they're rendered, that everything, all the rendered layers line up correctly so that things aren't passing through other things. And when people don't care, they just it's like, but you make animation, right? Yes, okay, yeah, that's what I do. I help make animation. That's what, yeah. So, yeah, and here's the thing, a studio like Pixar or EA for that matter, there are literally thousands of people that work there, and maybe less than 200 that are animators. Like that's their job title. But there's a whole lot of other people that work there, so there's a whole lot of other jobs that need doing. There's modelers and riggers and guys that write code and guys that implement stuff, and the special effects department, and just endless amount of texture artists and endless amounts of stuff that need to happen. Yes, the animation is what we see and we appreciate when we're when we're sitting in the theater, but there's a whole lot of other work that goes in.
Yeah, we've got like 4 or 5 actual animators, but we've got another like 5 or 6 modelers, and the artists actually get trained up on how to do textures sometimes,
Mhm.
so that they can just fit them to geo that the modelers like put out there. So
Yeah.
it's definitely-
So do your guys multitask? They do multiple jobs?
yeah.
See, that's pretty typical now too, except for in really, really big places like EA or Pixar or Disney or what have you. Generally, the jobs that you'll get coming out of school and getting started in the industry, you're going to need to know how to do more than one thing. You can have a superpower. You can be, if your animation is your superpower, that's great. But you should also understand and be relatively good at modeling or rigging or texture creation, because most small studios, game companies, they can't afford to hire specialists. They have to hire somebody who's more of a generalist.
Look at Scott Cawthon. He did the Finance for Friends games all by himself, so he did all
Mhm.
everything, animate all of it, code it, textures,
Absolutely.
and all that stuff. And
Yes.
you know how to do it.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. I've worked in a lot of small studios, and there have been instances where animation was my primary job, but it was never my exclusive job. I did a lot of stuff, so that works well for me because I like sort of knowing how everything works. But it's something to be aware of. Other people will tell you other stuff. I went to a talk last week where there was a guy from Pixar, and he said, when I was in school, I decided I was going to be an animator. That's what I was going to focus on. I ignored everything else. I couldn't model anything today. If you held a gun to my head, I couldn't. And I said, well, that's a little extreme. But, there's no reason to hold a gun to your head. I believe you. And that's fine as long as he's working at Pixar.
Okay.
But if he went to work at, Storm 8, let's say, he'd need to learn some things. Because, hey, it's great that you're not there anymore, So it's just, and it just keeps the day more interesting, I think. If you get to play a little bit in every sandbox, it's a little more interesting.
A few questions, 2 questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
They're quite different, but close. How is the final piece going to be put in? And where are these other 5 or 10 duplicates with all the movements going to live?
Well, that's what I was saying is once you've got them applied, save it off as a separate file, just so you've got it in case you need to tweak things later. But for your final scene, you can delete them. You just take them out because the information has already been applied to the main model, and they don't need to be there anymore.
The other question was, when working on the body, arms, and so on,
Uh-huh.
earlier versions of Max, before they changed it to Maya,
Right.
was IK, and there were restrictions put in for rotation,
Uh-huh.
for elbows and shoulders. Are we doing anything else like that?
We're going to be talking about that next week.
Okay.
We're going to get into skeleton next week. But to answer your question, generally, with an IK rig, you generally want to avoid putting in limits because it can cause issues in the animation. It is possible to limit joint rotation, and in a lot of cases you might want to do that, but generally not in an IK rig because you want the IK to have the freedom to move the way that it needs to move. There are ways to control it so that it goes exactly where you want it to go that don't involve putting in limits.
So, but what if there's a rotation? Okay, you're sitting there working, and if you're doing diligently enough, you won't rotate the arm out so it double backs on the elbow.
Uh-huh.
So you just have to pay attention to that while you do it.
There are instances where you might want to break the elbow backwards. There are times when, as an animator, you might want to, because our elbows only go this far,
Yeah.
but you might want to push it so that you get more of a thing that goes like if he's, a character's going to slap something,
Exaggeration.
Oh.
he's going to come around like this. You might want to push that the forearm further back than the elbow will rotate in order to emphasize that action. So that's why generally you avoid doing those limits, because again, if you put that limit in there so it won't go any further than this, and the animator wants to break the elbow in order to emphasize the motion, that rig's going to come right back to you. They're going to send it right back and go, I need to push the elbow past 180 degrees. Like, oh my God, that's horrifying. Yeah, we're not going to see it. We're going to feel it. So that's But again, like I said, there are ways to control, especially in IK. There are ways to control it so that you can get exactly the pose you want without having to put a limit on it. And we'll talk about that next week.
I'm throwing in one more.
Go ahead.
I'm going to be.
We're just recording all this. It's fine. You can listen back at your leisure.
You know what? I'm going to forget that I said it. I'm going to be glad I heard it there. Anyway, with the car, I want to use the IK on the suspension, but there's going to be a point at which I don't want it to rotate any further, so then it applies the deformation to the tire.
Uh-huh.
And the amount of rotation, I want it to stop at a certain point.
Okay.
So that if it's put into an engine, game engine, it already has those parameters.
But you're using NURBS to model a car, right?
Yeah, but I'm going to have
You wouldn't put NURBS into a
suspension and everything there.
right, but you're not going to you wouldn't put NURBS into a game engine.
No?
No, game engines always use polys.
So then it converted to poly.
You could do that.
Isn't there a function to convert it to polys?
There is, but it's an algorithm that converts it. You may end up with n-gons. You may end up with tries. So anyway,
The next car,
that might be an instance where you might want to have a limit. The other thing too is it would depend if you were going to procedurally animate that, where the motion was a function of how far the car or how fast the car was moving and what their terrain was like, then that would be a procedural animation rather than a hand-keyed animation. In that case, you might want to put some limits on it because you don't want the body flying off of the chassis.
yeah, and also for rally, it's if it's extended that much, the car is going to lift from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
That's for a rally car.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking in terms of for an IK sort of parameter. For the next car model that I build that has.
Well, if you're doing it procedurally though, I don't know that you necessarily want an IK solution. You might just want to have a a collision detection set up, so that so you've got some, and you can limit that as well. So that's a little beyond the scope of what we talk about in this class. That's more the advanced class.
Okay. Maybe that's what my wording is. Maybe now collision detection is more accessible, and when I was doing it or trying it, it was the IK stuff.
Could be.
All right, thanks.
You bet. All right, so here we go. Here's this week's assignment. Swoop. All right, here we are. So, using what we talked about tonight, which you can review in the video that's being recorded at this moment, you're going to create blend shapes for your character's facial animation. Blinks, eyebrows, mouth, whatever you think you need to complete your particular project. So the storyboard that you created, take a look at it, see what kind of facial expressions your character needs, and then you're going to create your blend shapes based on that. It's a good idea to make a list, just write it down of the expressions that you're going to need, and then break it down. So he's going to have to smile, or he's going to look worried, or what have you, and then from that, kind of just do a little breakout and figure out what expressions you're going to need. He's going to need the brows up and down. He's going to need the corners of the mouth to come in so that he can whistle, whatever it happens to be. Make sure before you start, I didn't do this, so I should have. Before you start making your blend shapes, make sure you delete the modeling history on the character. We talked about this once before, where you'd go in occasionally, delete by type history. Make sure you do this before you create the copies for your blend shapes. The reason for that is down the road, not only does Maya go through the blend shape or the deformer stack sequentially, when it applies things to the model that you're working with, if there's modeling history there, it'll also go through that. And occasionally, Maya does what I call get stupid. It'll go through and it'll run into a snag where a couple of lines of code are slamming into each other and they can't resolve, so it'll do something dumb. It usually happens late at night or on the weekends, when there's nobody that can help you out. It's like 2 in the morning, you're like, why the hell is it doing that? Well, because it's 2 in the morning. That's why it's doing it.
You guys can smell fear.
It can smell fear. Yeah, exactly. I had a shot to work on this past weekend, and it was like Friday night at 11 o'clock. And I'm like, I'm going to work on no, what are you, an idiot? Don't work on your shot now. Something will definitely go wrong, and you won't be able to sleep, and you won't be able to fix it. And it's, and then I got up Saturday, and everything went fine, because it was Saturday morning. The day spread before me. So, but make sure you delete your modeling history before you create your copies. You want to make sure that none of that history is remaining for when we hook up the entire rig. You just want it out of there because, again, it's for troubleshooting purposes. The more potential issues you can remove ahead of time, the less you'll have to work through if you end up with a problem that you have to sort out. So to do that, by the way, we also talked about, previously we talked about freezing transformations. Do not do that on your blend shapes. Do not freeze transformations on your blend shapes because it will zero out the positions of all of your vertexes that you've moved around, and then there won't be anything for Maya to calculate the difference on. So just delete history, just like this. We've got here, actually I'm going to do it a little bit differently. So I've got my model. I'm going to go edit, delete by type. Normally you do history, but because I've already applied the blend shapes, I'm going to do non-deformer history. And what that'll do is it keeps my blend shape interface in place so that all the blends still work. If I just deleted history, it would have taken out my blend shapes as well, and then they wouldn't have worked anymore. And I would cry because I'd be sad. Yes?
Is there a way to reset the scale only, or the rotation,
That's to reset the scale only.
or only the rotation. Just like if you have it rotated a bit, and you want that to be the new standard of rotation and scale, in case you have to resize.
Yeah, you just delete the history. Delete by type history, and that resets all the transform, the rotate to 0, and the scale to 1.
But then why didn't the scale go to 1? In your
Because this is I did non-deformer history, and that's a deformation. So yeah, that's why. If I let me open the other one. Recent file. Here's Phil. We're not going to save him. Edit, delete by type, history. Oh, and why? Yeah, you're right. Scale didn't go. Well, that's not good. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why that didn't go. Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I said it on the recording. I do know. Sometimes we just don't know. I'll have to look at that and figure it out.
Also, do we have to turn in the assignment this week?
Excellent question. The question was, do you have to turn in the assignment this week? The next time you'll turn something in is on the night of the final.
Alright.
Isn't that great? Now, what this means, though, is that you need to stay on top of the assignments, because it'll be really easy to just kind of, well, I don't have anything to turn in this week. I'll focus on my basket weaving class, or, my underwater tap dancing class, whatever it happens to be that you're taking besides this class. I cannot impress upon you strongly enough just how much time this is going to take. If you've been working diligently, you'll know that it's going to take you a lot of time. So,
I want to work on it further from the end to get.
right. So, there's the reason I don't have you turn things in is because I basically look at them and go, yep, that's what that is, and then move on. So it's, you're turning in stuff, I'm looking at stuff, it doesn't matter. I will come around, check and see how you're doing, just to see where things stand. But I can't emphasize enough, just stay current with the assignments, you'll do just fine. Typically what happens is students will fall behind, and I've also built some time into the schedule for that. But you have to keep in mind, we've already had one Monday off, and we got another one coming up in November. Veterans Day is coming up in November, and we will not be here one Monday. I, in fact, will be in Orlando that Monday. Going like this. Woo! Or something similar.
Disney
So-
World.
What's that?
Disney World.
Disney World, Universal Studios, Kennedy Space Center, et cetera, et cetera. We got a trip, it's like, yeah, trip. There are, during the animation portion, I've built in some additional time for people to get caught up, but you don't want to count on that. You want to be as current as you possibly can be, so that you're able to keep pace. Now, the other thing is today is the 28th, which means that next week is October, right? So if you have been working away from the studio, if you've been working at home, next week your lab hour sheets are due. So you want to turn in your lab hour sheets for August and September next week. If you've got them tonight, I'll be happy to take them tonight. But since we still got 2 days left in the month, and you're all working diligently, I know, and you probably work the next couple days, you want to make sure to log those hours as well. If you've been working in the lab here and logging in on the computer, you don't have to worry about it. But if you've been working away from the studio, make sure you bring your lab hour sheet with you next week. Completely filled out, name, G number, CRN, class name, date, start time, stop time, number of hours. Because if I give these to the lab assistant and he looks at them and they're not complete, he just hands them back to me and goes, you need to give that back to the student and have them fill it out. So there'll be a lot of paper shuffling back and forth. let's eliminate the middleman. Just fill it out all the way, and then when you bring it in next week, I'll hand it off, and it'll all be good.